In the vast expanse of the Galactic Trade Consortium, where starships worth billions of credits glide through hyperspace lanes like silver bullets, there existed one vessel that was the butt of every joke from here to the Andromeda Spiral. The humans called it Resilience, but everyone else had far less flattering names. To the Zephyrian ship inspectors, it was that metal coffin held together with hope and stupidity. The crystalline merchants refused to dock alongside it, claiming it lowered property values at every spaceport. Even the scavenger clans of the Outer Rim turned their noses up at its battered hull, dented panels, and engines that sounded like dying animals. What none of them knew, what even its own crew didn't fully understand, was that this worthless human vessel carried within its belly something that would reshape the balance of power across 3 galaxies. Something that the most advanced civilizations in the known universe had been searching for across millennia. Because humans, as the galaxy was about to learn, had a peculiar talent for turning the impossible into the inevitable. And sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the most unlikely places. The day everything changed started like any other, with Captain Sarah Chun staring at another rejection letter and wondering how long they could keep flying on fumes, prayers, and sheer human stubbornness. Captain Sarah Chun crumpled the rejection notice in her weathered hands and watched it float in the artificial gravity of Nexus Station's docking bay. The 67th rejection this month. Not that she was counting. Well, she was counting, but admitting it made the sting worse. Another shipping contract turned us down, she called over her shoulder to Marcus Webb, her chief engineer, who was currently wedged between 2 massive coolant pipes trying to coax their temperamental life support system back to life. Apparently, our vessel aesthetics don't meet their corporate standards. Marcus's muffled voice echoed from somewhere deep in the ship's bowels. Did you tell them our aesthetics include actually delivering cargo instead of exploding spectacularly in hyperspace like those fancy Zephyrian cruisers? Sarah managed a bitter laugh. The Resilience might look like it had been assembled by blind engineers during an earthquake, but it had never lost a cargo shipment. Never lost a crew member either, though that was more due to the fact that most sane beings refused to set foot on what the galactic insurance companies had officially classified as a mobile debris field waiting to happen. The ship groaned around them, metal plates shifting with a sound like old bones creaking. To untrained ears, it sounded like the vessel was falling apart. To Sarah, it was just Resilience talking the way she always did. Every ship had its own language of sounds and vibrations, and after 8 years as captain, Sarah was fluent in every squeak, rattle, and hum her ship produced. Captain, came the voice of Dr. Elena Vasquez over the intercom. We've got another problem with the fuel injection system. The consortium inspector wants to take another look at our fuel reserves before we can even think about leaving dock. Sarah's heart sank. Consortium fuel inspections were thorough, invasive, and expensive. The kind of expensive that a ship living from contract to contract couldn't afford. She made her way through the cramped corridors of her ship, past walls lined with exposed conduits and jury-rigged systems that would make a proper engineer weep. The Resilience had been built during Earth's early expansion period, when human engineering was more about making it work than making it pretty. She was a Hercules-class freight hauler, designed to carry massive loads across vast distances without breaking down. The emphasis had been on reliability and cargo capacity, not aesthetics or comfort. Her hull was a patchwork of repairs accumulated over decades. Blast scoring from pirate encounters, meteor impact patches, and the inevitable wear of constant use had given her a mottled appearance that reminded most observers of a diseased animal. The docking clamps were mismatched, salvaged from 3 different ship classes. The sensor array looked like it had been assembled by someone with a severe case of the hiccups. But she flew. By all the stars in the galaxy, she flew. Sarah found Dr. Vasquez and the consortium inspector, a tall Zephyrian with the typical blue-tinged skin and disapproving expression of a species, standing near the fuel storage bay. Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy for their pristine ships, advanced technology, and barely concealed contempt for human engineering. Inspector Keltron, Sarah said, forcing a smile. What seems to be the issue? The Zephyrian's gill slits fluttered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as disdain. Captain Shun, your fuel reservoir design is unconventional. The consortium requires detailed scans of any non-standard fuel storage systems for safety compliance. Sarah bit back her first 3 responses, all of which would have gotten her ship impounded. Of course, Inspector. Dr. Vasquez can show you whatever you need to see. Elena shot her a worried look. The fuel reservoir was their most closely guarded secret, not because it contained anything illegal, but because it was embarrassingly primitive by galactic standards. While most ships used sophisticated antimatter containment systems or crystalline energy matrices, the Resilience relied on good old-fashioned chemical propulsion with a fusion assist. It was like showing up to a hover car race riding a bicycle. Inspector Kelteron activated his scanning device, a sleek piece of Zephyrian technology that probably cost more than Sarah's entire ship. The device hummed as it analyzed the fuel bay, its holographic display showing layers of technical readouts that made the inspector's already sour expression grow darker. "This is highly irregular," he muttered, his universal translator making his clicking speech sound even more condescending. "Your fuel matrix readings are completely unlike anything in our database. The energy signature is unusual." Sarah's pulse quickened. The last thing they needed was unusual. Unusual meant investigations, impoundments, and bureaucratic nightmares that could keep them grounded for months. "It's just human engineering," Elena said quickly. "We use a hybrid system that combines chemical rockets with fusion boosters. Nothing exotic, just efficient." The inspector's scanning device began emitting a series of increasingly rapid beeps. His expression shifted from contempt to confusion, then to something that looked almost like alarm. "The energy readings are increasing," he said, stepping back from the fuel bay. "This is not possible. The resonance frequency is unlike anything in consortium records." Sarah exchanged glances with Elena. The Resilience had always been a bit quirky, but her fuel system had never caused readings like this before. Marcus's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, I'm seeing some weird fluctuations in the main power grid. Nothing dangerous, but the patterns are strange. It's almost like the fuel reservoir is responding to the scans somehow." The inspector's device was now beeping so rapidly it sounded like an angry insect. Holographic warnings began appearing around his scanner, text scrolling in rapid Zephyrian script. "I need to contact the Science Directorate immediately," Kelteron said, his previous disdain replaced by scientific curiosity. "These readings suggest your fuel reservoir contains materials with properties that defy current understanding of conventional propulsion systems." "Now wait just a minute," Sarah began, but the inspector was already activating his communication device. The next few hours were a blur of increasingly senior consortium officials boarding the Resilience. First came Inspector Kelteron's supervisor, a stern crystalline being whose translucent body pulsed with agitated colors. Then came representatives from the Science Directorate, carrying equipment that looked like it belonged in a laboratory rather than a docking bay inspection. With each new scan, the readings became more anomalous. The fuel reservoir wasn't just storing energy, it was somehow amplifying it, creating resonance patterns that shouldn't exist according to known physics. Dr. Vasquez had gone from worried to fascinated to deeply concerned as the implications became clear. Whatever was happening with their fuel system, it was attracting attention from beings who could afford to buy and sell ships like the Resilience as pocket change. "Captain," she whispered during a brief lull in the inspections, "I think we need to consider the possibility that we've stumbled onto something significant. These readings suggest our fuel reservoir isn't just storing standard propellant. The energy patterns are indicating something far more exotic." Sarah watched through the observation port as more consortium ships docked with the station. Official vessels with the sleek lines and advanced technology that marked them as belonging to the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. "Exotic how?" she asked. "I'm not sure," Elena admitted. "But the resonance patterns are similar to theoretical predictions for quantum vacuum energy extraction. If that's what we're looking at, then our worthless ship might be sitting on top of the greatest energy discovery in galactic history. Outside, Sarah could see Zephyrian science vessels taking up positions around the station. Their sensor arrays were all pointed in the same direction, toward the Resilience. Marcus joined them at the observation port, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades. "So, what's the word, Captain? Are we in trouble? Or did we just win the galactic lottery?" Before Sarah could answer, Inspector Kelteran returned with what looked like half the consortium science directorate in tow. Among them was a being Sarah recognized from news broadcasts, Director Vector Zal, one of the most powerful figures in the consortium government. "Captain Chun," Director Zal said, his forearms gesturing in what passed for politeness among the species, "I believe we need to have a very serious conversation about your vessel's fuel systems. The preliminary scans suggest you may be in possession of technology that could revolutionize space travel as we know it." Sarah looked around at her patched-up ship, her small crew, and the growing fleet of advanced vessels surrounding the station. "Director, I think there might be some mistake. This is just a cargo hauler. There's nothing revolutionary about anything we're carrying." Director Zal's compound eyes focused on her with disturbing intensity. "Captain, our scans indicate that your fuel reservoir is exhibiting properties consistent with zero-point energy manipulation. Such technology is considered theoretical even by our most advanced civilizations. If your species has developed practical applications for quantum vacuum energy, this changes everything." The words hung in the recycled air of the ship like a challenge to everything Sarah thought she knew about her own vessel. Zero-point energy was the stuff of science fiction, the theoretical, unlimited power source that every advanced civilization had been chasing for millennia. "There has to be an explanation," Sarah said weakly. "Humans don't have that kind of technology. We're barely keeping up with basic fusion drives." But even as she spoke, she could see the doubt in her own crew's eyes. The Resilience had always been unusual, even by human standards. She'd been told when she inherited the ship that her grandfather had made some modifications to improve efficiency, but he died before explaining what those modifications actually were. Dr. Vasquez was studying the consortium readings with growing excitement. "Sarah, look at these energy signature patterns. They're not random. They're showing clear signs of controlled quantum fluctuation. This isn't just storing fuel, it's extracting energy from the quantum foam itself." Director Zal stepped closer, his diplomatic facade slipping to reveal the predatory intelligence beneath. "Captain, I'm prepared to offer your government a substantial sum for the rights to study this technology. The applications for the consortium would be significant." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. She was beginning to understand that whatever was hidden in her fuel reservoir, it was valuable enough to start wars over. And suddenly, being the laughingstock of the galaxy didn't seem like such a bad thing compared to being at the center of a galactic power struggle. "I need some time to think about this," she said carefully. "And I need to contact Earth Command for guidance." Director Zal's expression suggested that time was not something she would have in abundance. "Of course, Captain. But I should mention that the consortium considers unregulated zero-point technology to be a matter of galactic security. For everyone's safety, I'm afraid the Resilience will need to remain here until this matter is resolved." Sarah's heart sank as she realized they weren't just dealing with a bureaucratic inspection anymore. They were under what amounted to house arrest, trapped on a station surrounded by some of the most powerful military vessels in the galaxy. The worthless ship that nobody wanted had suddenly become the most important vessel in known space. And Sarah was beginning to suspect that this was only the beginning of their troubles. 3 days later, Sarah found herself surrounded by some of the most brilliant scientific minds in the galaxy, all staring at holographic displays that showed readings from her grandfather's fuel reservoir. The main conference room of Nexus Station had been converted into a temporary laboratory, filled with equipment that hummed with quiet efficiency and probably cost more than most planetary defense budgets. The assembled crowd was impressive and terrifying in equal measure. Zephyrian quantum physicists with their perfectly ordered thinking processes, crystalline energy specialists whose bodies literally glowed with absorbed knowledge, and Vorthan mathematicians whose four-dimensional minds could process calculations that would drive most organic brains to madness. And sitting in the middle of it all was Sarah, feeling like a child who had accidentally wandered into a university lecture on advanced astrophysics. The energy extraction efficiency is impossible, Dr. Zilnara was saying, her crystalline form pulsing with frustrated orange light. According to every known law of thermodynamics, this level of zero-point energy manipulation should require exotic matter stabilization and quantum field regulators that are beyond even our most advanced theoretical frameworks. A Zephyrian physicist named Teclon gestured toward the holographic display with one of his elongated fingers. Yet the readings are consistent across all our instruments. The human vessel is extracting usable energy directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations with an efficiency rating of approximately 43%. 43%, breathed Dr. Mordak, the Vorthan mathematician. Our best theoretical models suggested that even 5% efficiency would require technology that wouldn't be developed for another 1,000 years. Sarah raised her hand tentatively. Excuse me, but could someone explain what all this means in terms that don't require an advanced degree in theoretical physics? The room fell silent. Sarah was getting used to that reaction. Ever since the discovery, she'd become something of a curiosity herself. The human captain who was too primitive to understand her own ship's revolutionary technology. Dr. Vasquez, who had been granted permission to attend the meetings as the ship's science officer, leaned forward. Sarah, what they're saying is that your fuel reservoir isn't just storing chemical propellant. It's literally pulling energy out of empty space itself. Empty space isn't actually empty, added Teclon, his translator making his rapid clicking sound almost professorial. At the quantum level, it's filled with virtual particle pairs that constantly appear and disappear. Your grandfather somehow figured out how to capture and convert that energy into usable propulsion. Director Zal had remained quiet during most of the scientific discussions, but now he spoke up. What we need to understand is how this technology works and, more importantly, how it can be replicated. That last part made Sarah's stomach clench. She'd spent the last 3 days reading everything she could access about galactic history and politics. Zero-point energy was considered the holy grail of space travel. Unlimited, clean power that could revolutionize everything from ship propulsion to planetary energy grids. Control of such technology could shift the balance of power across the entire galaxy. The problem, Dr. Zilnara continued, is that we cannot determine the mechanism. External scans show the energy extraction occurring, but the internal structure of the reservoir remains opaque to our instruments. We need to disassemble it, Teclon said bluntly. A complete component analysis is the only way to understand the underlying principles. Absolutely not, Sarah said, standing up so quickly her chair scraped against the metal floor. You want to tear apart my ship to satisfy your curiosity? Director Zal's forearms moved in what she'd learned was a calming gesture. Captain, please understand the magnitude of what we're dealing with. This technology could end energy scarcity across the galaxy. The potential applications are limitless, and the potential for war is equally limitless, Sarah shot back. I've done my reading, Director. I know what happens when someone discovers a technology that could upset the galactic balance of power. The room grew uncomfortable quiet. The consortium maintained peace through a careful balance between its member species, each contributing their own technological advantages. The Zephyrians provided advanced computing and engineering, the crystallines offered energy storage and processing, the Vorthans handled complex mathematical modeling and navigation. Humans, who had only recently joined the galactic community, were tolerated more than welcomed, valued mainly for their cargo hauling capabilities and willingness to take dangerous jobs that other species avoided. A technology that could provide unlimited energy would change everything. Marcus's voice crackled over Sarah's personal communicator. Captain, you need to get back to the ship. We got a problem. Sarah excused herself from the meeting, ignoring the disapproving looks from the assembled scientists. She found Marcus in the engineering section, staring at a diagnostic display with an expression that mixed confusion and worry. "What's wrong?" she asked. "The fuel reservoir," Marcus said. "It's been changing." "Changing how?" "See for yourself." Marcus pulled up a series of scans taken over the past 3 days. This is what the fuel bay looked like when the inspection started. Standard chemical propellant tanks, fusion injection system, nothing exotic. The display showed exactly what Sarah expected. The familiar configuration of tanks and pipes that had powered the Resilience for as long as she'd been captain. And this is what it looks like now. The second image made Sarah's breath catch. The fuel reservoir had completely reconfigured itself. Where there had been separate chemical tanks, there was now a single integrated chamber with crystalline structures growing along its walls. Conduits that hadn't existed before snaked through the compartment, pulsing with a soft blue light. "How is this possible?" Sarah whispered. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "But it gets stranger. Watch this." He activated a system diagnostic, and the crystalline structures in the fuel bay began to glow brighter. "The reservoir is responding to our ship's systems. It's integrating itself with the Resilience at a fundamental level." Dr. Vasquez joined them, her tablet showing readings that made her face pale. "The integration is accelerating. Whatever your grandfather did to that fuel reservoir wasn't just a modification, it was the installation of some kind of adaptive technology." "Adaptive how?" "The quantum resonance patterns are learning," Elena explained. "They're studying our ship's systems and optimizing themselves for maximum efficiency. It's like the technology is alive." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. "Are you saying my ship is being taken over by some kind of alien technology?" "Not alien," Marcus corrected. "The base design is definitely human, but it's incorporating elements that shouldn't be possible with current human engineering capabilities." A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Sarah activated the ship's communication system to find Director Zoll's image appearing on the main screen. "Captain Chun, our external sensors are detecting significant changes in your vessel's energy signature. I need you and your crew to evacuate the ship immediately while we investigate these anomalies. With respect, Director, this is my ship. If you want to study it, you can do so while we're still aboard." Director Zoll's expression hardened. "Captain, the energy fluctuations coming from your vessel are unlike anything we've encountered. For the safety of everyone on the station, I'm ordering an immediate evacuation." Sarah looked around at her crew. Marcus with his oil-stained coveralls and stubborn loyalty, Elena with her quick mind and protective instincts. They'd been through everything together, from pirate attacks to engine failures to the 100 small crises that made up life aboard an aging freighter. "No," she said simply. "Captain, this is not a request. And this is not a consortium vessel," Sarah replied. "The Resilience is registered to Earth, operating under human authority. You have no legal right to order us off our own ship." Director Zoll's 4 arms moved in agitation. "Captain, please be reasonable. The technology in your fuel reservoir could be dangerous if it's not properly understood. Then, maybe you should focus on understanding it instead of stealing it." The communication ended with Director Zoll looking like he was calculating the diplomatic cost of simply taking what he wanted by force. Marcus was studying the latest readings from the fuel reservoir with growing amazement. "Sarah, you need to see this. The energy output is increasing exponentially, but it's not random. The system is creating specific resonance patterns that match our ship's harmonic frequencies." "What does that mean?" "I think it means your grandfather didn't just install zero-point technology," Elena said slowly. "I think he created something that bonds with a specific ship, creating a symbiotic relationship between the technology and the vessel." Sarah stared at the readings, beginning to understand why her grandfather had been so secretive about his modifications. This wasn't just advanced technology, it was technology that chose its users. "Can other ships use it?" she asked. "Not without the Resilience," Marcus said. "The quantum resonance patterns are tied to this specific hull configuration, engine type, and probably 100 other variables that make our ship unique." A new alarm began, sounding throughout the ship. Sarah rushed to the bridge, to find external sensors showing a disturbing sight. Consortium military vessels were moving into position around the Resilience. "Captain," came a new voice over the communication system. This one belonged to Admiral Kethvar, the consortium's military commander for this sector. "You have 30 minutes to evacuate your vessel. After that time, we will board your ship with or without your cooperation." Sarah activated the ship's general communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for emergency departure. We're leaving." "Captain," Elena said from her science station, "the docking clamps are sealed. Station security has locked us in. Then, we'll unlock ourselves." Sarah turned to Marcus. "How long to break free of the docking clamps?" Marcus grinned, the expression of someone who'd spent years solving impossible engineering problems with insufficient resources. "Give me 10 minutes and access to the emergency power reserves." "You've got both." Elena, plot a course out of consortium space. "Fastest route possible." "Sarah," Elena warned, "if we run now, we'll be fugitives. The consortium will brand us as technology thieves." "We'll be fugitives who still have our ship and our freedom," Sarah replied. "If we stay, we'll be prisoners who've lost both." The next few minutes were a chaos of controlled activity. Marcus rerouted power through systems that weren't designed to handle that kind of load, while Elena calculated hyperspace coordinates that would take them far from consortium patrol routes. Sarah watched the external displays as consortium ships moved closer, their weapons systems clearly visible. "Docking clamps are releasing," Marcus reported. "Emergency power is holding, but we've got maybe 5 minutes before something important burns out." "That's 4 minutes longer than we need," Sarah said. "Elena, are we ready for hyperspace?" "Coordinates locked in. Course will take us toward the neutral zone." The Resilience shuddered as her engines came online, the familiar vibration that Sarah had felt thousands of times before. But this time, something was different. The ship's response was smoother, more powerful than it had ever been. "Energy output is up 300%, Elena reported with amazement. "The fuel reservoir modifications are providing power levels that should be impossible for our engine configuration." "Consortium vessels are moving to intercept," Marcus called out. "They're targeting our engines." "Then, let's show them what human engineering can really do," Sarah said. "Jump." The stars outside shifted and stretched as the Resilience entered hyperspace, leaving behind the consortium fleet and entering the vast uncertainty of space as fugitives with the most valuable technology in the galaxy. The neutral zone was exactly as welcoming as its name suggested. A vast expanse of space where no government held sway, populated by smugglers, pirates, and others who preferred to operate outside the reach of galactic law. It was also the perfect place for a fugitive ship to disappear, assuming they could survive long enough to find hiding place. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Resilience, watching the tactical display that showed 3 consortium pursuit ships closing on their position. They'd been running for 6 days, jumping from system to system, never staying in one place long enough to properly rest or repair. The ship was holding together through sheer stubbornness and Marcus's increasingly creative emergency repairs, but everyone knew they couldn't keep this up forever. "How are they tracking us?" Elena asked for the 100th time, her fingers flying over her sensor controls as she tried to identify the source of their pursuers' uncanny ability to follow their trail. "We've been randomizing our jump patterns, avoiding all known hyperspace routes, even changing our energy signature between jumps. They should have lost us days ago." Marcus emerged from an access panel, his coveralls even more oil-stained than usual. "Maybe they're not tracking the ship," he suggested. "Maybe they're tracking the fuel reservoir itself." "Explain," Sarah said. "Think about it. The reservoir is manipulating quantum vacuum energy on a massive scale. That kind of activity has to leave some kind of signature in subspace, something that normal sensors might miss, but specialized equipment could detect." Elena's eyes widened with understanding. If the consortium developed tracking technology specifically designed to follow zero-point energy signatures, they could hunt us across half the galaxy. Sarah felt a familiar weight settling on her shoulders. As captain, every decision was ultimately hers, and every wrong choice could mean death for her crew. Options. We could try shutting down the fuel reservoir, Elena suggested. Run on conventional power and see if that breaks their lock on us. For how long? Marcus asked. Our normal fuel reserves are nearly depleted. We've been relying on the zero-point extraction for primary power since we left Nexus Station. Without it, we've got maybe 6 hours of flight time left. 6 hours to find somewhere to hide, Sarah mused. What's in this system that could provide cover? Elena consulted her navigation charts. We're approaching the Kepler graveyard, a stellar nursery that went wrong about 10 million years ago. Dozens of failed stars, asteroid fields, radiation storms, and gravity anomalies that play havoc with sensors and navigation systems. Perfect place to lose pursuit ships, Marcus agreed. Also a perfect place to get lost ourselves and die horribly in any number of creative ways. Sarah studied the tactical display, watching the consortium ships steadily closing the distance. Their pursuers were Zephyrian interceptors, fast and deadly, with weapon systems that could reduce the resilience to scrap metal in minutes. But they were also precision instruments designed for clean, efficient operations in civilized space. Take us in a graveyard, Sarah decided. If we're going to make a stand, might as well do it somewhere that gives us an advantage. The transition from normal space into the Kepler graveyard was immediately apparent. The ship's sensors began registering dozens of conflicting readings as gravitational fields from failed stars twisted space-time into knots. Radiation from collapsed protostars washed over them in waves that made their instruments flicker and spark static across the communication systems. This is insane, Elena muttered, fighting to maintain stable navigation as gravity wells pulled them first one direction, then another. Half our instruments are useless. The other half are showing readings that violate known physics. How are the consortium ships handling it? Sarah asked. Elena managed to get a clear sensor reading for a moment before another radiation storm washed over them. They're falling back. Looks like they're trying to maintain sensor contact from the edge of the graveyard rather than following us in. Smart, Marcus commented. Their ships are too valuable to risk in this kind of chaos. Sarah felt a moment of relief, quickly followed by the realization that they'd traded one problem for several others. The graveyard might provide cover from pursuit, but it was also potentially lethal to anyone who didn't know how to navigate its hazards. There, Elena said, pointing to a sensor reading that flickered in and out of existence. Large metallic object, roughly ship-sized. Could be a wreck or maybe a station. Or a trap, Marcus added cheerfully. Only one way to find out, Sarah said. Take us in, but carefully. If it's inhabited, we don't want to come across as hostile. The object resolved into clarity as they approached. A massive space station that looked like it had been assembled from the hulks of a dozen different ship types. Docking bays jutted out at odd angles, connected by a framework of girders and conduits that had clearly been added over time as needed. It was ugly, functional, and somehow reassuring in its complete lack of aesthetic consideration. Getting a response to our standard approach signal, Elena reported. Text only, heavily encrypted. It says state your business or become target practice. Friendly, Marcus observed. Sarah activated the communication system. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the human vessel Resilience. We're seeking temporary refuge and are willing to pay standard rates for docking privileges. The response came back quickly. Human ship, you're either very brave or very stupid to be running around the graveyard in something that looks like it was built from spare parts. Docking Bay 7 is open. Any hostile moves, and we'll introduce you to vacuum the hard way. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself walking through the corridors of what turned out to be a surprisingly sophisticated operation. The station was called Haven, and it served as a combination trading post, repair facility, and neutral meeting ground for anyone who needed to conduct business outside the reach of galactic governments. The person who met them at the airlock was not what Sarah had expected. Instead of the grizzled pirate or criminal she'd imagined, she found herself facing a middle-aged woman with calloused hands and intelligent eyes, wearing coveralls that marked her as someone who got her hands dirty fixing things. "Captain Chun," the woman said, extending a hand. "I'm Administrator Nikimure. Welcome to Haven. Though I have to say, you're either the luckiest or unluckiest ship captain I've met in years." "How so?" "Lucky because you found us. Unlucky because half the consortium fleet is looking for you, and the other half is probably on the way." Administrator Nakamura led them through corridors that bustled with activity. Sarah saw beings from dozens of species, some she recognized, and others that were completely alien to her experience. What they all had in common was a certain wariness, the look of people who lived outside the protection of galactic law and had learned to rely on themselves. "How much do you know about our situation?" Sarah asked. "Enough to know that you're carrying something the consortium wants very badly, and that they're willing to break several interstellar treaties to get it. Word travels fast in the neutral zone when major powers start mobilizing fleets." They reached Nakamura's office, a cluttered space filled with ship schematics, trade documents, and what looked like several generations of accumulated coffee cups. The administrator poured herself a drink from a pot that had seen better decades, and offered the same to her guests. "So," Nakamura said, settling into her chair, "what exactly are you carrying that's got the consortium so worked up?" Sarah exchanged glances with her crew. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford, but they needed allies if they were going to survive long enough to figure out their next move. "Zero-point energy technology," Elena said simply, "built into our fuel reservoir by Captain Chin's grandfather." Nakamura's cup stopped halfway to her lips. Zero-point energy. The theoretical unlimited power source that every civilization in the galaxy has been chasing for the past 1,000 years. "Apparently not as theoretical as everyone thought," Marcus said. "And it's integrated into your ship in a way that makes it impossible to remove or replicate," Sarah added. "Which means the only way to study it is to control us." Nakamura set down her cup and leaned back at her chair. "That's a problem, Captain. The kind of problem that starts wars." "We're aware of the implications," Sarah said. "What we need to know is whether Haven can provide us with sanctuary while we figure out what to do next." "That depends on several factors," Nakamura replied. "First, how many consortium ships are we talking about? Haven has defenses, but we're not equipped to fight off a full fleet." Elena consulted her portable sensor unit. Long-range scans show at least 12 vessels maintaining position at the edge of the graveyard, more arriving every few hours. "Second factor," Nakamura continued, "is whether you can pay for extended docking fees, supplies, and the increased security risk your presence creates." "We can pay," Sarah said, though she wasn't entirely sure how. Their credit accounts had probably been frozen by now, and traditional currency was useless if they couldn't access galactic banking networks. "Third factor is the most important," Nakamura said. "What's your long-term plan?" "Haven is neutral ground, but that neutrality depends on not harboring fugitives indefinitely. Eventually, you'll have to move on." Sarah had been dreading that question because she didn't have a good answer. Earth Command would probably order her to surrender the ship and its technology to Earth's Science Ministry, which would then likely be pressured into sharing it with the consortium. Going rogue wasn't an option. She couldn't keep running forever with pursuit ships, tracking their every move. "We need to find a way to disable the tracking," she said finally. "If we can break their lock on us, we might be able to disappear long enough to figure out a permanent solution." Nakamura nodded thoughtfully. "That's not impossible. We have some of the best engineers in the neutral zone here at Haven, people who specialize in making ships and equipment invisible to various forms of detection. But it won't be cheap, and it won't be easy." "What would it take?" "First, we need to understand exactly how the consortium is tracking you. That means detailed scans of your fuel reservoir and its quantum signature. Second, we need to develop countermeasures that don't interfere with the zero-point energy extraction itself. Third, we need to implement those countermeasures without alerting the consortium ships that are undoubtedly monitoring this station." It was a daunting list, but Sarah had faced impossible challenges before. How long? Best case scenario, assuming we can solve the technical problems, maybe a week. More realistically, 2 weeks minimum. Sarah looked at her crew, seeing her own concerns reflected in their faces. 2 weeks was a long time to stay in one place with consortium fleets gathering outside. But it was also their best chance to regain some control over their situation. We'll do it, she decided. Whatever it takes. Nakamura smiled, the expression of someone who appreciated determination even when it bordered on foolishness. Then, welcome to Haven, Captain. Let's see if we can solve the greatest technological mystery in galactic history while staying one step ahead of the most powerful military forces known to exist. Outside, through the station's observation ports, Sarah could see the distant lights of consortium ships maintaining their patient vigil. They were trapped, but not defeated. And somewhere in the depths of her grandfather's modifications lay the key to changing the balance of power across the galaxy. She just had to live long enough to figure out how to use it. The engineering bay of Haven Station hummed with activity as some of the most brilliant minds in the neutral zone struggled to understand technology that shouldn't exist. Sarah watched from the observation deck as teams of specialists swarmed over detailed scans of the Resilience S-Fuel reservoir, their arguments echoing through the reinforced transparent walls. Down on the main floor, a Kandorian quantum engineer named Zixtar was gesticulating wildly with his forearms while debating resonance frequencies with Dr. Vasquez. Nearby, a human engineer who'd introduced herself only as Snake was running calculations on a holographic display that made Sarah's eyes hurt to look at directly. Any progress? Administrator Nakamura asked, joining Sarah at the observation window. Plenty of progress toward understanding that they don't understand anything, Sarah replied. It's been 4 days, and they're no closer to figuring out how my grandfather's modifications work than when they started. The problem, came Marcus's voice from behind them, is that we're approaching this backwards. Sarah turned to find her chief engineer approaching with a coffee mug in one hand and a data pad in the other. He looked like he hadn't slept in the 4 days since they'd arrived at Haven, which was probably accurate. Backwards how? Nakamura asked. Everyone's been trying to figure out the technology, Marcus explained, settling into a chair that looked like it had seen service on half a dozen different ship types. But maybe we should be trying to figure out the engineer. Sarah frowned. You mean my grandfather? Think about it, Marcus continued, activating his data pad to show a timeline he'd been constructing. Thomas Chun was a good engineer, but he wasn't a genius. His service record shows solid competence with conventional systems, nothing that would suggest he could develop zero-point energy technology on his own. So how'd he do it? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to hear the answer. Marcus's expression was grim. I think he had help, and I think I know who provided it. The data pad's display shifted to show archival records from Earth's early expansion period. Sarah recognized some of the dates. They corresponded to her grandfather's final tour of duty before he retired and began working on improvements to the Resilience. Your grandfather's last assignment was to the Kepler Research Station, Marcus said, a deep space facility that was supposedly conducting routine stellar cartography. Supposedly? The station was destroyed 3 weeks after your grandfather left. Official records list it as an accident caused by a reactor overload, but the timing is suspicious. And there's something else. Marcus pulled up another set of records, these ones partially corrupted and marked with classification symbols that Sarah didn't recognize. I had Snake help me dig through some databases that are not normally accessible to cargo haulers. The Kepler Research Station wasn't doing stellar cartography. They were studying artifacts. Administrator Nakamura leaned forward with interest. What kind of artifacts? The kind that predate known galactic civilization by several million years, Marcus replied. The kind that suggests someone else was playing around with zero-point energy technology long before any of our current species developed spaceflight. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. You're saying my grandfather found alien technology and somehow incorporated it into our ship? I'm saying he found technology that was so advanced it might as well be alien, and he figured out how to make it work with human engineering. Marcus corrected. The question is whether he understood what he was really doing, or whether he just got lucky. Dr. Vasquez joined them, her hair disheveled from hours of intense work. "We need to show you something," she said without preamble. Snake found something in the quantum resonance patterns that changes everything. They followed Elena down to the main engineering bay, where Snake was manipulating a holographic display that showed the fuel reservoir's energy patterns in 3 dimensions. The human engineer was a small woman with cybernetic implants that replaced her left eye and most of her right arm, modifications that allowed her to interface directly with computer systems. "Look at this," Snake said, her artificial eye glowing as it processed data streams. "Everyone's been focusing on the energy extraction, but that's not the interesting part. Watch what happens when I isolate the control signals." The holographic display shifted to show a complex pattern of quantum fluctuations that pulsed through the fuel reservoir. Sarah had seen similar displays dozens of times over the past few days, but this one was different. The patterns weren't random. They formed recognizable structures. "That's binary code," Elena breathed. "The quantum fluctuations are encoding information." "Not just any information," Snake said with a grin that showed several gold teeth. "Instructions. The fuel reservoir isn't just extracting energy from quantum vacuum. It's following a program." Sarah stared at the holographic display, trying to process what she was seeing. "A program written by whom?" "That's where it gets interesting," Snake replied. "The base code structure is definitely human. I can recognize programming conventions that were common during Earth's early expansion period. But there are sections that use mathematical principles I've never encountered before." Marcus consulted his datapad. "Sections that might have been derived from the artifacts found at Kepler Research Station." "Exactly," Snake confirmed. "Your grandfather somehow combined human programming techniques with alien mathematical frameworks to create something entirely new." Zixtar, the Kandorian engineer, clicked his mandibles, and what Sarah had learned was excitement. If this analysis is correct, the fuel reservoir is not just a power source. It is a learning system. It adapts its energy extraction patterns based on feedback from the ship's operational requirements. "Which explains why the modifications are ship-specific," Elena added. "The system learned the resilience-S characteristics and optimized itself accordingly." Administrator Nakamura had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up with the tone of someone who'd spent years dealing with the political implications of advanced technology. "This raises some uncomfortable questions. If your grandfather had access to alien artifacts, what happened to them after he died? And more importantly, does Earth Command know about any of this?" Sarah realized that was a question she couldn't answer. Her grandfather had been secretive about his work on the ship, claiming only that he'd made efficiency improvements that would help her compete with more modern vessels. She'd inherited the resilience along with his personal effects, but there had been no mention of alien artifacts or revolutionary technology. "We need to contact Earth," she decided. "If there are other artifacts, or if Earth Command knows about zero-point energy technology, they need to be aware of our situation." "That might be problematic," Nakamura warned. "Communication from the neutral zone to Earth would have to go through consortium relay stations. There's a good chance they're monitoring all traffic for any mention of your ship." Snake looked up from her holographic display. "Not necessarily. I can set up a quantum entanglement communicator that routes through some alternative channels. It'll take a few hours, but the signal will be completely untraceable." "Do it," Sarah said. "But first, I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with." "Snake, can you decode the program in the fuel reservoir?" "I've been trying," Snake admitted. "The human sections are straightforward, but the alien mathematics are unlike anything I've encountered. It's like trying to solve equations where half the symbols represent concepts that don't exist in normal space-time." Zixtar clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Perhaps the problem is one of perspective. If the artifacts originated from a civilization that manipulated quantum mechanics differently than current galactic species, their mathematics might be based on fundamentally different assumptions about reality. Can we work around that?" Elena asked. "Possibly," Snake said. but it would require access to more computing power than we have available. The kind of parallel processing needed to brute force decode alien mathematics would take months with our current systems. Sarah was beginning to understand why the consortium was so determined to capture her ship. The fuel reservoir didn't just represent a new energy source. It represented a window into a level of technological sophistication that could revolutionize their understanding of physics itself. "There's another option," Marcus said quietly. "We could try to contact the source." "What source?" Sarah asked. "The aliens who created the original technology. If they're still around, they might be willing to help us understand what your grandfather built." The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge to everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The idea that advanced alien civilizations might still exist, hidden somewhere beyond the reach of the consortium's exploration fleets, was both terrifying and exhilarating. "How would we even find them?" Elena asked. Snake's artificial eye began glowing brighter as she processed data streams. "Actually, that might not be as impossible as it sounds. The quantum resonance patterns in your fuel reservoir aren't random. They're following specific mathematical sequences that could serve as a kind of technological signature. Like a fingerprint," Zixtar added with obvious excitement. "If we could trace the source of those mathematical frameworks, we might be able to determine where the original artifacts came from." Administrator Nakamura looked skeptical. "You're talking about searching for a civilization that predates known galactic history by millions of years. They could be anywhere in the galaxy, or they might not even exist anymore." "They exist," Sarah said with sudden certainty. "The fuel reservoir isn't just following a program. It's learning, adapting, evolving. That level of sophistication doesn't come from dead technology. There's something alive in those quantum patterns." As if responding to her words, the holographic display flickered and shifted. The quantum resonance patterns began forming new configurations, more complex than anything they'd seen before. "The system is responding to our analysis," Elena said with amazement. "It's like it knows we're trying to understand it." Snake's fingers flew over her control interface as she tried to record the changing patterns. "This is incredible. The fuel reservoir is generating entirely new mathematical structures in real time. It's not just following a program. It's writing new programs as it goes." "Can you communicate with it?" Sarah asked. "I can try," Snake replied, her cybernetic implants glowing as she interfaced directly with the quantum resonance patterns. "But I need to be careful. If this system is as advanced as it appears to be, attempting direct communication could trigger responses we're not prepared for." Sarah looked around at her crew and the assembled engineers, seeing excitement and fear in equal measure on their faces. They were standing at the threshold of one of the greatest discoveries in galactic history, but they were also playing with forces they barely understood. "Do it," she decided, "but carefully. If my grandfather trusted this technology enough to integrate it into his ship, then we need to trust it enough to try making contact." Snake nodded and began typing commands that appeared as quantum fluctuations in the holographic display. Sarah watched as the patterns responded, shifting and evolving in ways that suggested not just intelligence, but consciousness. They were about to make first contact with something that had been hiding in the Resilience S fuel tanks for decades, waiting for someone curious enough to look beyond the surface and brave enough to reach out into the unknown. The worthless ship was about to reveal its greatest secret, that it had never been alone. The quantum resonance patterns shifted into configurations that made the air in the engineering bay feel charged with electricity. Sarah watched as Snake's cybernetic implants glowed brighter, her artificial eye-processing data streams that were beyond human comprehension. The holographic display showed mathematical structures that seemed to bend space around them, creating visual distortions that made reality feel unstable. "Contact established," Snake announced, her voice carrying an odd harmonic that suggested her vocal cords were resonating with the quantum patterns. "But this isn't just a program or an artificial intelligence. There's something else here." The holographic display suddenly exploded into a riot of color and light that resolved into an image that took Sarah's breath away. Instead of the alien entity she'd expected, she found herself looking at a translucent figure that was unmistakably human. "Sarah," the figure said, its voice carrying across the engineering bay with perfect clarity despite having no apparent source. "I've been waiting for you to find me for 37 years. Sarah's legs gave out, and she found herself sitting heavily in the nearest chair. The figure in the holographic display was older than she remembered, marked by lines and gray hair that hadn't been there when she was a child, but there was no mistaking the gentle eyes and patient smile. "Grandfather?" she whispered. "Not exactly," Thomas Chan replied with the same slight smile she remembered from her childhood. "I'm what's left of him, anyway. A quantum consciousness matrix that your grandfather created when he realized he wouldn't live long enough to see his work completed." The engineering bay had gone completely silent. Even Zixtar had stopped his constant mandible clicking as everyone struggled to process what they were witnessing. Dr. Vasquez was the first to find her voice. "A quantum consciousness matrix. You stored your grandfather's personality and memories in the fuel reservoir." "Not stored," the image of Thomas Chin corrected. "Integrated. The zero-point energy technology doesn't just extract power from quantum vacuum. It creates a stable quantum field that can support consciousness itself. I've been living in that field, learning and growing and waiting for Sarah to become curious enough to look beyond the surface." Sarah felt tears threatening to spill over. "Why didn't you ever tell me? All these years you've been here, and I never knew." "Because you weren't ready," Thomas replied gently. "The technology is dangerous, Sarah. Not just the zero-point energy extraction, but the consciousness integration protocols. They require someone who understands both the possibilities and the responsibilities." "Responsibilities to whom?" Administrator Nakamura asked, her practical nature asserting itself even in the face of the impossible. Thomas's expression grew serious. "To the architects, the civilization that originally developed this technology millions of years ago. They're not gone, Administrator. They're waiting." "Waiting for what?" Marcus asked. "For someone worthy to carry on their work," Thomas explained. The architects reached a level of technological sophistication that allowed them to transcend physical existence entirely. They became beings of pure consciousness, living in quantum fields that span entire galaxies. But they left behind tools for younger civilizations to find. Snake's artificial eye was recording everything, her cybernetic implants processing data streams at their maximum capacity. The artifacts at Kepler Research Station, one of hundreds scattered across the galaxy, Thomas confirmed. Each one a test, a puzzle designed to identify civilizations that might be ready for the next stage of evolution. Most species that find them try to weaponize the technology or use it for personal gain. They fail the test. "What makes humans different?" Elena asked. Thomas's smile widened. "Stubbornness, mostly. Humans have a peculiar talent for taking impossible situations and finding ways to make them work through sheer determination and creative problem-solving. It's exactly the kind of trait the architects were looking for." Sarah wiped away tears she didn't remember shedding. "So what happens now? The consortium isn't going to just give up and go home." "No, they're not," Thomas agreed. "Which is why it's time to level the playing field." The quantum resonance patterns in the holographic display began shifting again, forming new configurations that made the air hum with potential energy. Sarah could feel something changing in the resilience, as if the ship itself was awakening to possibilities it had never known it possessed. "The fuel reservoir has been operating at minimal capacity," Thomas explained. "A single quantum consciousness matrix managing basic energy extraction. But the architect technology is designed to support multiple consciousness matrices working in parallel." "Multiple how?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. "Every human crew member can be integrated into the quantum field," Thomas said. "Not replacing your physical existence, but augmenting it. Enhanced cognitive abilities, direct interface with ship systems, consciousness that can survive physical death. It's what the architects call symbiosis, The perfect merger of biological intelligence and quantum consciousness. The implications were staggering. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the same mix of wonder and terror on their faces that she felt in her own heart. "What about the consortium?" Marcus asked. "They're not just going to let us fly away with technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization." "They'll try to stop us," Thomas admitted, "but they won't succeed. Not once you understand what the resilience is truly capable of." The holographic display shifted to show a schematic of a ship that was both familiar and completely alien. Sarah recognized the basic hull configuration and major systems, but there were new elements that glowed with quantum energy signatures. The zero-point extraction was just the beginning, Thomas explained. The architect technology can restructure matter at the quantum level, creating new alloys and materials that are stronger than anything in the consortium's database. It can manipulate space-time directly, allowing for faster-than-light travel that doesn't rely on hyperspace lanes. And, most importantly, it can replicate itself. Replicate itself how? Administrator Nakamura asked. Every ship that interfaces with the quantum field becomes a carrier for the technology, Thomas replied. Not theft or conquest, but voluntary integration. Ships and crews that choose to join the symbiosis network become part of something larger, a collective consciousness that spans star systems while preserving individual identity and free will. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. You're talking about changing the fundamental nature of spacefaring civilization. I'm talking about evolution, Thomas corrected. The same evolutionary step that the architects took millions of years ago. The difference is that humans have the opportunity to bring other species along for the journey, to create a truly galactic consciousness that includes everyone rather than leaving some behind. And if we refuse? Elena asked. Then the consortium will eventually capture the resilience, reverse engineer what they can of the technology, and use it to consolidate their power over the galaxy. The architects will wait another few million years for the next species to find their artifacts. The choice was impossible and inevitable at the same time. Sarah looked around at the faces of her crew, the people who had followed her into exile and trusted her to keep them safe. She thought about the consortium fleet waiting outside the graveyard, ready to seize technology that could change everything. "What do we need to do?" she asked. Thomas's smile was proud and sad at the same time. "You need to choose, not just for yourselves, but for everyone. The symbiosis process is voluntary, but once it begins, there's no going back. You'll still be human, but you'll also be something more." Snake was studying the quantum resonance patterns with fascination. "How long does the integration process take?" "For basic symbiosis, about 6 hours," Thomas replied. "Full integration with ship systems takes longer, but you'll be functional long before the consortium realizes what's happening." Sarah stood up, feeling the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. Every choice she'd made as captain had been about keeping her ship and crew safe, but this choice was about something far larger than their individual survival. "Everyone needs to decide for themselves," she said finally. "This isn't something I can order you to do." Marcus was the first to respond. "I've been working on this ship for 8 years, trying to keep her flying with spare parts and prayer. The idea of understanding how she really works, of becoming part of her systems at a fundamental level. I'm in." Elena nodded slowly. "The scientific implications are incredible. To learn from civilization that's millions of years more advanced than us, to help bridge the gap between human knowledge and architect wisdom. How can we pass up that opportunity?" Snake's grin was fierce. "I've been interfacing with machines my whole life through crude cybernetic implants. The chance to achieve true human-machine symbiosis? Hell yes. The resilience is about to demonstrate some capabilities that aren't in any consortium database." The holographic display showed the consortium ships maintaining their positions at the edge of the graveyard, their sensors focused on Haven Station. Sarah watched as quantum energy began building in the Resilience-S systems, patterns of force that bent space-time around the ship. "What are you doing?" she asked. Sending a message, Thomas replied. The architects believe in giving people choices. The consortium can choose to withdraw and allow us to leave peacefully, or they could discover what happens when primitive military technology encounters quantum consciousness manipulation. Sarah felt the ship around her beginning to change, metal and systems reconfiguring themselves as the architect technology awakened to its full potential. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would never be the same. The worthless ship that nobody wanted had become the most powerful vessel in known space, crewed by humans who were about to take the next step in galactic evolution. And somewhere in the quantum fields that surrounded them, the architects were watching with approval as another species joined the ancient dance between consciousness and cosmos. The age of humanity was about to begin, and the stars themselves would bear witness to what mortals could accomplish when they dared to reach beyond the possible into the realm of the infinite.